Hey, Carla.
Hi, Tasha.
Got everybody we're gonna get.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm talking to the group here, just checking to see
Okay.
if this is it. How's everybody doing today? Good, 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 good. Doing good, doing good. So, we'll go ahead and get started. Got a lot of stuff to cover here today. And just real quick, as it states right here on the document, the purpose of the training today is to equip you with the tools and resources to bulletproof your transaction and to help you get paid faster. Anybody having any issues with processing their documents, where to find documents, how to complete documents, what to do once you get a listing, once you get a buyer, all of that. You? I've never seen that before, but we'll take a look at it at the end of class. Okay. Anybody else got anything with any of their transactions that we might be able to address real quick? You haven't got that far? Well, you're getting ready for it. There you go. You're laying the foundation. So guys, I'm going to be covering some of the material today, and our trusted and capable and expert Carla Kettler is going to handle a lot of the compliance questions as it pertains to Command, what she's looking for when she's reviewing your documents in Command, how to make sure they're clean and ready to go and you're not holding up your money, okay? Anytime you're the last minute uploading your documents, signing a document, it's just pushing your paycheck back further and further and further, okay? I had somebody come in my office this morning and ask, how long should it take for me to get paid if I closed on Friday morning? I said, well, was your documents clean? Well, I don't know. There's your answer right there. Because the only person who should really know is you, right? Carl is helping us by reviewing them, but it's our job as realtors to make sure each folder is approved, it's ready to go. I don't need to go back to my seller for anything. I don't need to go back to my buyer for anything. I've got everything I need from them. Okay. So make sure you're paying attention to the emails coming from compliance. One of the first things we want to address, really we're starting at we're under contract or we're about to go under contract. Some of the things we want to pay attention to are the remarks and instructions on the MLS, right? We're getting the information from the MLS that tells us where to send the offer to purchase, where to call with questions. Okay. If you're working with one of these big companies out of another state and they've got listings here in our state, you might call a home office to get an answer. It might say, call Joe Smith at 12345 area code. Okay. So if you continue to call that listing agent and there's a remark or a note in the remarks section that says, call Joe Smith, you're continuing to call the wrong number. Okay, so all the more reason to read those instructions, read those remarks, look for attachments that might have instructions in them as to what you need to do when it might be something a little bit different than your standard resale local agent you're communicating with. Okay, documents and disclosures. We know we find those on the MLS, right? Make sure you have all of them. Not all of the ones that the agent has uploaded, but all the disclosures required for that property. Okay. We know if it's prior to 1978, we not only need the residential property disclosure, the mineral oil and gas, but we also need the lead paint, right? So that's our job to get that for our buyer. The listing agent should have put it out there. If it's not out there, it's our job to go chase it down for our buyer. Okay, so make sure you're collecting all of those. Again, we're at the point of contract. Couple of things you want to make sure you're collecting. What is this right here? Compensation agreement. Up until June of last year, we could look in the MLS and see what our compensation was, right? No more. Okay, we need to either find out, verify with the listing agent, get it in writing, get the compensation agreement, or submit the compensation agreement with our offer. Okay. So what might be a scenario where you need to submit the compensation agreement with your offer? Where the what? That could be it. Listing agent's not answering the phone, so you don't know if the listing agent or the seller's paying your commission as the buyer's agent. You're just kind of out there, I got this offer ready to go, but don't know if I'm going to get paid. Okay. Well, that's what we're talking about. What should you do? Where did exactly? You need to include what if you're in North Carolina, the 220, South Carolina, the 120, right? With your offer. Can you reference that form on your offer? No. Where should you reference that? In the email. What language should you use in that email? You learned this last Thursday in T group. Well, just tell us where to find it. Tell us where to find it, and we'll go out here and find it, and we'll all read it. Mm-hmm. So what? WB resources, to go into office resources and then get to general forms. And we are looking for the buyer agent questionnaire, which I think is general information, is right here. So the language we would want to include with that offer is right here. Does everybody know where to find it? Hey, everybody write this down. KWB resources, office resources, forms and checklists, and then North Carolina buyer agents basic overview. Doesn't hurt to go out there and review this, read it. Anything you don't understand, bring it to your transaction partner group or bring it to me or Sabra. If you're working with a buyer and you're not sure how to address the compensation, you need to read this, make sure you understand it to the point that you can explain it, okay? And then if you're submitting an offer because you can't get the compensation agreement from the listing agent, you're going to use this language right here. My buyer client has authorized me to send a cooperating compensation agreement, form number 220, or if South Carolina, form number 120, with the offer to purchase to you with the condition that both agreements are part of the offer and must be signed and returned simultaneously by the seller in order for our offer to be accepted. Okay? Well, avoid is compensation agreement. They signed the offer to purchase and you never heard anything back on the compensation agreement. Okay, so we're sending those over together. We want to. Telling them to the listing agent together. Okay, you want a response as it pertains to both of them at the same time. Okay, if you're negotiating with that listing agent and they're, oh, well, we need you to come up on the purchase price and we need you to remove the closing costs and we're not going to pay a home warranty. Your conversation can address that, but you also want to ask, so you're good with the compensation of 3%. You're good with the compensation of 3.5%. Whatever that number is, don't leave that out there hanging and then you get a signed agreement back. Well, we negotiated the contract. We didn't say anything about the compensation. So make sure you're continuing to include that as part of the negotiations. Hmm. Um, buyer's compensation. North Carolina buyer agents overview. That's why you're going to use this language right here. Okay, right there. You know where to find that? Where do you find it? Where? Where do you find that language? No, where do you look to find that document that has that? Uh-huh. You got it. Good job. Good job. Okay. So guys, make sure you're paying attention to that. It could mean the difference in signing a contract with no compensation as opposed to documents back in agreement on both documents. Okay. Don't get 5 days down the road and call me and say, hey, I never got the buyer agency agreement signed and we're closing in 5 days. My question to you would be, what would you like me to do? Okay. So make sure you're working, get paid. Have documentation to show that you'll be paid. Okay. What's the other thing you need to do as it pertains to your compensation? Say that again. Enter it into command. So you have a buyer agency agreement for 3.5% for 3%. Okay. You receive a 220 from me, the listing agent, and I'm paying you 2.25. What do you do? Buyer agency agreement. You're working with the buyer. I'm the listing agent. You and your buyer have an agreement for 3%. I'm the listing agent. I'm paying 2.25. Mm-hmm. And basically, what you should do or be prepared to do based on your initial conversation with that buyer is refer back to that initial conversation. Remember when we met and went over your buyer agency agreement and I told you it would be 3% and I would do my best to get it from the listing side? The listing side has agreed to take 1/4, which means that leaves 3/4 for you to. Or you're not going to put the 3/4 of a percent. Okay. That depends on the conversation you had with your buyer. Okay. Yeah, that's your conversation.
Then they sign. Then with the seller, see how much they pay. So if they said, no, we don't pay more than 2%.
Mhm.
So, and they sign no more than 2%, and they count it to the counter offer. It was the counter offer for the buyer. Seller gives counter offer with the sign of 2%. They sign it and they said, you'll agree with your
For your commission? Mhm.
and counter offer for this property like that.
Mhm.
Then what will happen? Then the counter offer and that commission to the buyer, both of them, the buyer. Then they have to, not only they have to, maybe they change to counter offer and also negotiation with us for what will happen. And the buyer, I just wondering when when we give them back the counter offer and email for the commission to the buyer, do they accept it or?
That's up to the buyer. You and your buyer, right? So if you send over an offer, let's play this scenario out. You have an offer and you send it over to the listing agent, and the listing agent came back with a counter offer on your compensation as well as the offer to purchase. So what's that process called? Negotiations, right? So you receive that counter offer, you go to your buyer. They received our offer. Here's the counter offer. Let's talk about it. Then you hear from your buyer, yeah, we're not gonna go up as high as they want, and we can't pay a full 1% for your commission if they're only paying 2%. So it's negotiations, right? So you're letting them know you offered 450, they want 475. You want to come up to 475, or is there a number in between that you would like to offer? Or do you want to back out of the deal totally? In addition to the price change, they're not paying my 3%, they're paying 2%, which leaves 1% for you to pay, because the buyer needs to know all of that because it impacts their funds, right? Then then your buyer is not accepting that or the offer?
We got the accepted. They don't want buy.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they already said they would pay 3%. You just got 2% from the buyer side. So now all they're obligated to is 1%. For the buyer agency agreement? Mhm. You're gonna forget about the 1%, then you could change it either on your buyer agency agreement, or you could complete the addendum, form number 710, that states you're gonna identify which agreement you're under, indicate buyer agency agreement was 3% for the buyer. However, seller is paying 2%, buyer will pay the additional 1%, and you want to reference that specific property, right? Why do you want to reference that property? You still have that period. You have a buyer agency agreement for 3%. You found a listing that's only paying 2%. Your buyer is now saying, I'll pay the 1% to make up that 3%. Okay? You want that to apply to that one property. Why is that? What if that buyer goes away, finds out, I can't get financing, deal fell through, just heard from my employer, I'm being relocated to Arizona. Guess what? It's gone. Okay. But what if your buyer says, I can't get that property, or it's too many problems with that property. I want to find another property, and the other property is paying 3%. No. You keep that buyer, and you keep that buyer agency agreement intact, because You only reference the one property when you reduce the commission. Okay? Because you can't go back up on your commission, you can only come down. So if you run across a property and we're paying 2% and the buyer is gonna pay 0.5%, you've now reduced your commission to 2.5%, right? For what? For that one property. Then it's all because you did reference the agreement, right? Mm-mm. And there's language as it pertains to that. There is no set commission. We do ask for 3% normally. Does that mean you can't go below 3%? No. Okay. What we don't want to see is you doing 1.5, and consistently. If you have a client that you're working with consistently and you've said, they told you you're gonna buy one owner occupant property and 3 investment properties, maybe it makes sense to charge them 2% buyer agency commission. What we're saying applies across the board for buyers and sellers, okay? So based on that, like I said, we're not looking for agents to go out there, hey, I'll sell your house for 1%. I'll sell your house for 1.5. There have been times, especially provisional brokers, you'll need to submit a request to SABRA to see, does it make sense for me to reduce my commission in this case? Once you're capped for a full broker, you make your own decision, but make a wise decision. Because what happens if you go out there and you sell 3 properties for 1% and they tell 10 of their neighbors about it and you sell their property for 1%, you've just cut yourself out for dollars. Pardon me? No, you're gonna need to use your judgment on that. I can't say, you'll probably meet a buyer next week and you'll show them 5 properties and they'll be under contract. And I can't say, if you're working with an investor and they want you to go up to Huntersville in Columbia, it might be 3%. That's probably a question you want to talk to your coaches about. But there is no, if you show 5 properties and they decide it's 3%, if you show 80 properties, you can bump it up to 5. There's no, you know what I mean? So you have to make that judgment for yourself. I do know, like I said, if you're a PB, shoot Sabre an email and say, hey, I'm looking to offer something less than the 3%. Ask for something less than 3%, and here's why. And she'll respond to you.
And we could change commission to be a 710, or we could do it on the. Is there a certain way we should go?
Well, that's a good question. On the 710, you're going to complete the document. This young lady did one just a little while ago. And you complete the document collecting the signatures and initials, right? Any corrections or changes to the listing agreement or any other documents need to be initialed by the parties to the agreement and dated. So if you're making those changes on your listing agreement, you're changing from 3% to 2.5%, you're going to cross out 3%, do 2.5%. Your sellers initial it and you initial it, or buyers initial it and you initial it, depending on what agreement it is. Okay. But to your, well, no, because you need one, right? So let's say you're going to show properties today. Let's take a scenario. You're the buyer's agent, you're the listing agent, and you're the buyer. Okay, so that's your buyer over there. You're going to show her 5 properties today. What do you think you're going to do before going out to show the properties? Any commission.
Yeah.
Good point, good point. And then you're going to advise your buyer, right? Let your buyer know, we have an agreement of 3%. Here's what the 5 are offering. 3 are offering 3%, 2 are offering 2.5, which means this buyer, if you choose one of these, it's gonna mean you only have to come to the table with 0.5%. These 3, they're covering all of whatever that number is. And then once she's aware, or you've already talked to the seller or listing agent, once she's aware, you guys will go ahead and see the properties, and she decides which property she wants. And you decide, does it match what's in my buyer agency agreement, or do I need the amendment? Okay,
So let's say she wanted to go for the new construction house.
okay, mhm,
So, starting online, I told her that, okay, let's do 5%.
okay,
And we can
mhm,
let's
mhm,
construction house,
mhm,
right? So that, said that I would do for the resale houses,
okay,
and definitely we're not gonna get 5%, right?
okay.
So in that case, we have to. What's the right time?
Well, and here's the thing, you don't even know if new construction's offering 5%, right? So you're showing her houses based on her likes and dislikes. And one of the criteria that you're going to use in educating her on the property is what the builder or the resale agent is offering as compensation. Okay, so there's nothing to change until you guys decide to either go under contract or write an offer. What you're going to do in the meantime is educate your buyer. The builder is offering 5%, so they're covering all my commission. The builder is offering 3.5%. And based on our conversation, I'm gonna reduce my compensation to 3.5 for that property. Okay, but if she never writes an offer or goes to that property and sees it and doesn't want to write an offer, there's nothing for you to do. You know what I'm saying? So until she, as your buyer, decides that's the property I want, there's no amendment or agreement you need to change. Okay, you can stay at that same. Mhm.
Upon for showing the property, we need to call title, the agent of that property. And ask for the seller's permission for that.
Well, let's stop right there. Is that something you can do? Okay, you can call them, right, and ask them, can you send me the compensation you're offering for 123 Apple Court? Can you text them? Yeah. Can you ask them to email you? Yeah. Can you submit the compensation agreement with the offer? So all of that is doable. You- It's just good business to know what they're offering before.
For 5 houses, you know, each one has four. The seller agent told us that this one has 3%, this one has 2%, this one has 5% or 4%. When we show the property, we can tell the buyer that this has 3%, this one has 2%,
Mhm.
so is it okay?
Yeah, absolutely. You can tell them when you show the house or before you show the house or whatever the case may be. You know, if it's a property that they're kind of on the fence about, well, we might want to see it, we might not. I don't know. She likes it. I don't really care for it. Don't like the neighborhood. And you call and find out they're offering 1%, that might knock it off their list. Okay, so it's perfectly fine and expected basically for you to share that with your buyer because it impacts what they have to bring to the table. Okay. Yeah, exactly. You know, and again, it's gonna be on a case by case basis. You know, if you're working with a buyer and my buyer said, we don't care, we'll do our commission, whatever, we're not gonna find another buyer agent who takes care of it. You sold 6 of our houses, and helped us buy 5, you're our agent. If they don't pay you 3%, we're gonna pay it. Probably no big deal to them. You're still gonna let them know, but it's no big deal. But let's say you're talking to somebody and you've got 3% in there and, well, I might be able to get part of it as a gift from my parents or my uncle, or, but this one's at the top of our budget and we were gonna get additional money from them to help pay for that. Maybe that one's not a fit for them. So you're gonna have to look at the overall offer, what their situation is and what's going on. Or is it at a price point to where you could come down to 2%? Is it 1.5 million and you're okay with making 15 grand at 1.5%? You know, so it just depends. Mhm. Yeah,
I don't know what seller thinks. Is it better to put 3%, 5, 4% commission, take that one, or to increase the price and put 2% commission?
yeah. And every situation's different. And who's here to help them understand and go through that? We are. That's our job. That's our job. Mhm.
Yeah. Also, with what the buyer is looking for. So you want to get the best thing for your money, but also want to, consider this one. Compensation with your buyer, what it is you want to establish front. Then that way when you go, you know what the buyer, you know what the buyer's expectations are.
It's negotiation, exactly. Mhm.
Say this, builder provides 5% commission. Now that's 2.5%. Plus those have of pay, right?
It goes at this point, and I'm glad you brought that up because that is being discussed right now. The attorneys at the real estate commission, at this point, that money would go back to the seller. Okay? It had been discussed that it would go to the buyer, but at this point, it sounds like it would go back to the seller. So here's the thing, being careful when you're talking to buyers who are looking to write new construction. Okay, if we had an agent just the end of last year who would have walked away from 5% commission plus a $10,000 bonus on a $650,000 house. Okay, so thousands and thousands of dollars could have gone away had she been under the new rules, right? So as it stands right now, there's nothing we can put in there. However, once we get an answer, and hopefully that'll be today or tomorrow, that we'll have an answer as to if we can put plus $10,000 bonus offered from the builder, or plus a bonus offered from the builder, or 5% commission. Okay. And then that way you do have the option to lower your commission. You just can't increase it. We're just waiting for something concrete that tells us what we can and can't do as it pertains to bonuses and some of these builders incentives that they're offering. Okay. That's correct. So if you have a 3% commission and the commission is 2.5, you can reduce it, but you can't go to 3.5. Okay. So let's talk about the checklist. Everybody know where to find the checklist? Okay, resources and where else?
forms and checklists.
Forms and checklists,
Yeah.
and then click on the appropriate link for the checklist.
Right.
Parties to the contract. Buyer, seller, attorney, lender, who else might be involved? Contract,
Buyers,
who?
co-signers.
Post might be involved. Mhm. Yeah. Buyer's agent, listing agent, they're not parties to the contract, but they're managing the process, so they do need a copy of the contract, right? Okay, making sure you collect and verify all signatures and initials, okay? I sent in our agency agreement on Saturday, I think, and completely forgot to initial 2 pages, okay? So make sure you're reviewing your pages and everything is signed and initial, or this young lady right here will come looking for you. Okay, make sure your corrections are initialed by all parties to the contract. You just asked a few minutes ago, how is that done if you make the correction or the change in commission on your listing agreement or your buyer agency agreement? Change whatever you're changing, have all parties to the contract, initial and date. Okay. Distribute contract to the attorney or paralegal, listing agent, the seller, buyer agent. What are you sending over with the contract to the attorney these days? You need to send the compensation agreement over with the contract. Hey, Mr. Closing Attorney, we'd like to use your services to close the property at ABC Jones Street. I've attached a copy of the contract as well as the 220 compensation agreement. Go ahead and add in that email. Listing agent is paying me 2.5. My buyer is paying 0.5%. Okay. You're gonna have other opportunities to put that in the buyer information sheet, the selling agent sheet, or the listing agent sheet, but it doesn't hurt to put it in that initial email. Okay, not all closing attorneys are gonna operate in the same fashion. It may or may not be on that buyer information sheet. That email may be the only opportunity you have to tell them the commission is split up this way. Seller's paying me X, buyer's paying me Y, for a total of 3% commission, 5% commission, whatever that is. We've had 3 or 4 agents miss out on 0.5% or 1% commission. And it's after the fact, buyer's gone, seller's gone, and nobody's gonna track that money down for them. Okay, so make sure you're paying attention, telling the paralegal what you're expecting and verifying it as you go along. Once you get a copy of that closing disclosure, you need to look at that and make sure the amount coming from the seller side is accurate and the amount coming from your buyer is accurate. Okay. You have your contract, you've distributed it. Make a note of important dates and track your timeline. Okay, so what's some important dates in the contract?
Diligence.
Due diligence end date.
Yep.
Okay, settlement date.
Yep.
Did you schedule an inspection and when will it be done? When should you have the inspection report back? When will the appraisal be done? Who are you going to follow up with to make sure you get it on time? Okay, all of those things we should be following up on. And if it's a notebook like I do the old fashioned way, or if it's an alarm on your phone that tells you, hey, time to follow up on some of your transactions. Okay, make sure you're following up. That's our job. That's why these buyers and sellers hired us, to stay on top of the transaction. Okay, Carla, anything you want to add to what we just covered?
Well, I will go into more detail on the 220 and the 120, especially the 220, when you have to amend the contract.
Okay.
Okay,
Well, you want to jump in on command and add that to
Yeah.
of your command.
sure, let me do that.
Okay.
Okay, so you're in command, and I'm going to share my screen so
Good
that
deal.
you can see what I'm doing. thought. So I'm going to stop Tasha's.
Do I need to, want me to stop mine?
I think I just
you
did
are.
that. Okay.
There you are.
So you all, yeah. So you're in my command right now.
Okay.
And I'm specifically about the 220. I specifically am looking for the 220. I look on that form and see the 2.5% that the listing firm. Make sure you're checking. It's usually the listing firm that is going to pay the seller has given permission for the listing firm to pay the commission. Okay, so that's the most common one. If it's a for sale by owner or something like that, then it would be the seller. Okay. So I'm looking for the percentage amount, and right away I'll check that with what you have in your buyer agency agreement. Okay. This obviously with
See
for
your screen.
I'm
You
sorry.
look lovely. We can't see your screen.
Oh,
Want to try to?
can you now?
There it is.
Yeah, okay. Okay, sorry. So I'll just quickly go back there. And in the 220, this is obviously North Carolina. I look to make sure, did you guys get that I am looking for which one is checked? Usually it's the listing firm on the listing agreement, or the listing agreement. The seller usually authorizes the listing agent to offer the compensation. Okay, so make sure it's going to most likely be the listing firm, unless it's like a for sale by owner or such as that the seller would pay. And then on the 2.5%, it's my understanding that that's what you're going to send to the listing agent. You're going to send the cooperative compensation agreement 220. I know that doesn't happen all the time, but this amount has to match what's in your buyer's agency agreement. So I check that, and then I immediately go back to your buyer agency agreement and make sure it's matching. Okay. So if it matches, you're done. You
Carla,
don't. Yes.
real quick, going back to that where you said it has to match what's in your buyer agency agreement.
Yes.
Were you referring to buyer agency or listing agreement?
No. Even with the compensation agreement,
Mm-hmm.
if it doesn't match, you have to use a 710.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay.
That's what I was making sure of that.
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
So if it matches, then you're done. You don't have to do anything else. If it doesn't match, like Tasha said, you can't go higher. So if you put an amount like 2% on there and the listing agent is offering 3%, you can only take 2%. You can't go up, okay? So you would ask, I guess you would ask the listing agent to reduce that to 2%. Okay. So, but if they're offering 2% for the listing agents on the 220 is saying 2% and your agency agreement says 3%, then, and Sabra has these forms, I think are also in KWB resources, that she's already put the wording in for you, which is really nice. So this one, amend to acknowledge split commission. If you click on that, everything that's underlined, all these placeholders that are underlined, meaning you can click on them and the form will come up. So make sure you're looking at that. So this is what her wording is, and you can either copy and paste this one, or you can just reference this wording. So per the cooperative compensation agreement, the listing firm has agreed to pay, let's say, 2%. And then per the referenced buyer agency agreement, the buyer hereby acknowledges and consents to pay the remaining. If you said 3%, then it would be 1% here. And then that would equal your buyer agency agreement. Okay, if you choose to take the 2%, so you wouldn't want to charge your buyer anything, this is to match the 220. So you're going to the buyer agency hereby agrees to reduce the firm's compensation to whatever matches in the listing agreement or the 220. The buyer will not pay compensation shortage at closing. And I believe that if you have to change anything, you'd have to give this form also to the attorney so that they know. Is that correct, Tasha? Well, okay, she might have left. But anyway,
The buyer will not pay the difference. In
yeah,
that
this would,
conversation, yeah, they wouldn't need this, they would need what the seller.
yeah, I can't,
Of your compensation.
right.
The seller is paying 2%, and
You're really garbled, Tasha. I can hardly
Better?
understand. Yeah.
that
Okay.
matter?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Close. If your buyer is making a difference in 2%, your buyer is paying 1, or you really need to let the paralegal and the closing attorney know different places. And
Yeah.
this let them know receiving from the listing side is just
Yeah. Okay. So those two things are already in here for you. They're the templates. And this is in the North Carolina side. South Carolina doesn't have these forms. So you would have to go back and amend your buyer agency agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, get them initialed by all the parties and dated. So.
Okay, we got a question on this in, Carla.
Okay, and you'll have to, I can't hear anybody else's unless they use the microphone.
Go ahead. Oh.
Right there. Can you hear me now, Carla?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, hi. This is Mary. So just for clarity, on a listing agreement, when you choose to mark nothing, which is not a required field on the 101 form in terms of the buyer agency information, but they submit the cooperating compensation form to you with the offer, then you do the 710 and you end up going from 0 to 2% at that point.
Correct.
So that's when you do go up. Okay, got it.
Yes, if initially they didn't offer any buyer agency compensation, and then you put the 220 in there, or you've agreed to what the buyer wants, buyer agent wants, then you have to amend it using 710, or in South Carolina, cross
Okay,
through.
let's go back to that. You're referencing the buyer agency agreement, Mary?
No, I'm looking at my listing agreement.
Listing.
Okay. From a
This
listing
is the listing agreement.
Okay, and you had it at what?
I put nothing there because it's not a required field for cooperating compensation for the buyer's agent.
Oh, okay, and
So
then
put
they
0.
decided they would pay the buyer's agent?
Well, they knew they would, but they wanted them to ask for it. They didn't want to just, my seller was something else. So he just wasn't gonna put 3% because he's like, I just let him do it.
Okay.
And then when we did get the offer, he decided to, well, she asked for 2% on her cooperating compensation form, and they agreed.
Okay,
So now we're doing the 710 amendment
Okay,
to go from 0, which was on my list.
to 2%, the one we
Yes,
talked about.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. All right. Good. Everybody got
Okay.
that? Good
So
deal.
that's how you, those things have to match. Everything has to match, okay? And you do that by using the 710, either by matching the 220 or use a 710 to reduce the fees, reduce your fees, okay?
Carla, we got a
And-
question.
Okay,
If the 3%, if there was the seller, the listing agent with the 3%, and buyer agent, and the buyer agent has the too, the buyer won't pay us 3%, just get it from seller.
The 2%?
I didn't hear the question.
That's Tasha.
Okay, are you, hang on, are you representing the buyer or the buyer? And you have a buyer agency agreement at what amount? 3%? Okay. Okay,
Then buyer won't pay anything.
that's correct.
It doesn't need to change the 7 or 7.
There's nothing to change. It's already in your buyer agency agreement that it's 3%.
When it's 3%, the seller pay.
Yes, so so you don't need the 710, you just need the 220 indicating the seller is gonna. Okay. Okay. Carla, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was confused by that. I couldn't hear the question, so. Okay, so that's the main thing for the 220s and that, and the 710s, excuse me. So you need, first of all, you do need to pick the right checklist. Okay, so if it's a North Carolina transaction, pick the North Carolina one. Okay, this little drop-down menu here will give you a whole list of what's in the sale files. Okay, the North Carolina, South Carolina. New construction is very important because there's far less documents that you need for a new construction than for a regular resale. So if they're buying new construction, make sure you're choosing the new construction, either North Carolina or South Carolina. Okay, if it's your buyer and they're buying a South Carolina, make sure you're picking the right one. Okay, so that's important. That will then all these placeholders will come up. The consultation folder in a buyer's agency will have the two working with real estate agent and buyer's agency agreement. This will be true of the listing agreement as well. But you'll have to submit these to me. Then it'll be right up here. There's going to be a little blue button that says submit to MC. Okay, so once you have those signed, you have 3 days to submit them to me. Okay. So within
Got
3
that?
days, yeah.
I'm sorry, Carla. Everybody
Yeah.
heard what she said about submitting your documents. Okay, every week we're getting folders that are submitted on the day of closing. Not
Yes.
all, from the time they did the working with real estate agent, they went under contract, they had inspections, they negotiated, and then they submit all the documents the day of or the day before closing. There's a step in there that tells you when the document should be submitted. And Carla, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna click on one of these checklists.
You'll have
You
to,
see
let
this
me,
checklist? First step, submit within 3 days, submit within 7 days. All of those checklists tell you when to submit those documents.
yeah, so that's why it's important to look at those. Even I'm old school, so I would print those out and use those like
Here,
that.
Carla.
You got it?
Are you logging into KWB resources? or-
Yes, yeah.
Okay. I'm on here if you want me to just click somewhere.
And I don't know if anybody can see yours right now. Oh, no, that's the, I'm sorry. That one, I went checklists. And so if you're doing North Carolina, oh, that's the listing, then a first step, submit it to for review. This should say in command. We can't see your DocuSign. Okay, so submit it for review from command. I mean, when you bring them over to from DocuSign into command, submit that for review. Okay. And then the second step with all the other documents that's needed, at least 7 days before closing. That will give me time to review it, and you can do any corrections that need to be done prior to closing. And then you'll be done for closing, and then you'll be able to get paid. Okay, so there, like Tasha said, there's so many that will submit all 3 folders at closing. So I'm reviewing all the documents, notice some mistakes. I have to send them back. Then you have to go back to your client after closing to get everything fixed.
Yeah.
Okay. And that doesn't look too good. Okay. So that's why I like to keep a copy of these handy so that I know what I've submitted and what I need to submit and when. As far as the placeholders, there's also this right here, the requirements. And the red one is required, okay? So you have to put in your working with real estate agent and buyer agency agreement. Same with all of these. All the ones that say required I'm going to look for them, okay? And if they're not in there, of course, it'll be marked missing. Now, there's a couple in here that I have to have them correct because some of them say that they are required when they're really not, but conditional, obviously, if you look at the little I right there, and it'll say when it's conditional. Okay, so the W-9 will be conditional if there's an outside referral. Okay, so their W-9 needs to be in there. And then obviously, if it's a for sale by owner, you'll need this unrepresented seller form. Short sale, it's just all of these other ones are optional. Of course, if you terminate a transaction, then the termination has to be in there. Okay. So just look at those, make sure you're submitting all of the red ones. Okay. And then, of course, if you need to amend your buyer agency agreement or listing agreement, then I'll look for these as well. Okay. Does that make sense? If there's no questions, again, you're going to pull them from either DocuSign or .loop or from your computer. Okay. And a little hint I like to do is if you're in DocuSign, there's 15 million documents, it seems, that are uploaded into DocuSign. Yes. Did you start to say something, Tasha? Okay. So there's so many that are in there, and there could be 3 or 4 buyer agency agreements, 3 or 4 offer to purchase. Just, if you will, you can right click on the title of that form in DocuSign And you'll learn this at in Jules and Leah's classes too. But if you right click on that document, that's the correct one, and just put a little number 1 or something that distinguishes it from all the others, you'll know which form you need to upload into Command. Okay. So that's how you would upload. Do you have a question? Anybody have a question? Okay. And again, do your submission. I always check the forms that say that they've been submitted or resubmitted and changed. So if you see something in your documents or in your folders that says open, I'm not going to see it. So, and you have to submit each folder. Don't just submit the closed folder if you haven't submitted the consultation and the under contract folder. Okay. Consultation or listing. Okay. So make sure you're submitting each folder.
Submitting timely, like she said earlier. One of the folders within 3 days, another folder within 7 days, and we should be getting that closed folder within 2 or 3 days.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Now, if you go in and you have a lot of times it's you want to upload the CCRs or something to prove that the water and sewer are paid by the HOA. And there's no folder or there's no placeholder for an HOA documents. If you need to add that, you do that. Can everybody still see me?
Yep.
Okay. There's 3 little dots right up here to the right and above the placeholders. If you click on those, you'll add a document. Okay. So you can name the document, HOA documents or whatever document you have that you want to add. And then you'll have to choose a document type. And I don't care what the document type is. You can pick whatever is more appropriate for you. That I don't care about. And then either upload it from your DocuSign here, or if you have it in your email or in your files on your computer, then you would just click there, browse, and find where you have that document. Okay? And then click Save, and that will load that document to the very bottom of the screen. Okay? And then I'll know to look for it. A lot of times that happens with the receipt of the monies, which is over here, the EMD and earnest money and due diligence. So this one, obviously, she has a due diligence, but it's not in here. Okay, you can either I like doing the merging, and I use this program to merge my documents. It's so easy. If it's foxit.com and then /merge. So you just click here, select however many documents. So if you've saved your earnest money acknowledgement and due diligence acknowledgement on your computer, choose them and it'll sort them, and then you click Start Now, and it merges those documents, which makes it much easier to upload into Command. Then you'll have both of them. Otherwise, if I don't see, like, if here, for instance, I don't see a due diligence acknowledgement, I'll look at the very bottom of her screen to make sure she didn't upload it. Okay. Does that make sense? That's how you upload a document that there isn't a placeholder for. Please don't put a document that's needed in a random placeholder, because these have names. And I don't want to see, I mean, it's hard to keep them separate. If it says it's a termination and you have an additional provisions addendum in there, please don't do that. Either put it in the proper placeholder or add a placeholder, okay? And so this one, where's the one it's rejected? So I've rejected a document here, and you'll get a note in your email, or if you look into your command, I leave a note right here. So in the rejected documents, there'll be a little dialog box right here next to the placeholder. Okay, if you hover over that, it'll say exactly what's missing.
Carla, real quick, does that email come from you specifically, or does it come from compliance?
I think it comes from MC, the MCA.
Okay, so
Yeah.
look for emails. Don't just delete those emails that reference
Yes.
MCA compliance or something. That's
Yeah,
something where he has reviewed your file and has sent you a message.
yes. And then you can go, like Tasha says, it's good to be able to check your command files frequently so that you know what's needed, what's missing, what's been rejected, so that you'll be able to get everything done on time for closing. Okay, so I usually get pretty detailed as to what's missing and where. A lot of them have a whole bunch of things that are missing, especially in the like in the listing agreement or the bigger documents. You have to make sure everything is checked and dotted and and crossed and everything else. So I try to get pretty detailed on that. So just look for that note, and then you need to replace that document. Don't put it in the one next to it or below or above it. Put it right in there by clicking these three dots next to the file you need to replace and click update. Okay, so if you update it, it asks you why you're re-uploading the document. I never answer those questions. So just put the corrected one in there and update it. Then that'll say it's been updated, and then it'll say changed, and it'll come back to my queue. Okay. So that's how you update a document that is needing fixed. Okay, there's also this, the bell up here. If you're kind of in your command looking around and you notice you have a little red dot by your bell here, just click on it, and then my notes will come up here for you as well, or whoever's notes. Sometimes Lynn or Liz sends you a note through this. But then if you have several transactions going, and I have a note for one particular transaction, then just click on view request, and it'll bring that opportunity up that I've referenced. Okay, and then it'll say what needs to be fixed and what and what needs to be, or yeah, what needs to be fixed and how, or missing. Okay. Any questions on that?
None here.
Okay, so I'll move on. Just make sure that you get those in on time. Once you, let's see what we're gonna, let me see, follow up. Oh, make sure that if it is an LLC or a trust, make sure you're adding those documents, okay? This would be in the listed folder. So if your client is a trust, then you need to include that in here under the LLC, trust, or estate, or whatever, as a corporation that's buying or selling that document needs to go in there because we need to have proof that the signer of the documents is part of the LLC. Okay. So there's that. Make sure you're entering, check each folder. So this is a closed folder. So a lot of times, let me show you in the offer to purchase, on page 12, are all those extra documents that are included with the sale, such as the additional provisions addendum or lead-based paint. Oh, my computer's slow. Come on. I went too fast for it. There it is. So all this addenda, okay, the seller possession after closing, buyer possession before closing, those documents go in the closed folder. So if you don't see a placeholder for them in the under contract, look in the closed because often it's there. But under this one, I check all these. If it says FHA or if additional provisions is a lot of times checked, then I'm going to look for those documents. And if they're not there, I'll mark them as missing. And then a lot of times people say, why'd you mark that missing? Because it's checked in your offer to purchase. Okay, that means it's part of that contract. So it needs to be in there, okay? So that's what I'm looking for. What else? So you've got that. If for the name of your opportunity, look in the opportunity details and make sure that the address that they're buying or selling is in this part right here. Because if that comes up and it goes up in here, that makes it easier for us to find your opportunity. Okay, so if you have a question or if we need to find that because we have the check, then we can find it through the address. Okay. The other thing is then the most important thing for you to get paid is right here. Okay. So this says there's nothing there, meaning she didn't fill this out yet. That's okay. She's not at closing yet, and it should be done at least 7 days before closing. If you know that there's not going to be any more changes to the contract, especially the price and the commission, then go ahead and fill that out. So what you're going to do is click on that and it's going to say add a new offer. Okay. Then you're going to add that offer and some, I think it says accept the offer. Okay. Let me see if I can find one that might be done.
Carla,
Yes.
she is, a couple of them are playing catch up with you. If you go back to, they're trying to figure out how to get to the compensation or the offer.
The offer. Okay, let me show you because I think one of them here is done. So let me here. Okay, no, she didn't
Be
do the
right
offer
there
yet.
at the top where documents are and then offers.
So right at there's all these timelines and right here at
See
the
her-
offer. So this one, they've submitted all their closing documents, but they're not going to be paid, even though all this could be approved. They won't be paid yet because this is not done. Okay, if this isn't done, this part goes to Lynn, who gets your checks, who has to use this part to pay you. Okay, so that's why this is so important. Okay, I'm going to try to find one that's already done. So if you add an offer, you have to fill all that out. Okay, all the ones that are an asterisk. So you have to put the seller's rep agent and all that and the terms. And the terms, if it's a sale price and you don't know if they're paying, part of it is financing and part of it's cash, just put it all in the financing. Unless you want to do the math. And then you're going to create that offer and accept it. Okay. Once you have that offer accepted, it'll say manage commissions. You're going to click on that. I wish I could find one. It's already done. Sorry. Let me see. Nope. They usually don't do theirs. Figures. Oh, let's see. Melanie, you probably did yours. I can't hear what you're saying. Unmute you.
Who?
Oh, me and Sydney are sitting here talking about how we didn't do it and how we're in trouble and this is like, oh, and I've got to email Lynn on it is why it's not.
Ah, yes. Can you see where it says open? So she's already done her offer, accepted the offer, okay? But they didn't click on manage commission. Okay, so once you click there, I'm just going to go into it. I won't do anything with it. You go into your manager commission and you're just going to follow the prompts. Okay. It'll say general information, good, and then go into commission details. And you're going to put down, make sure all the commission is correct and your calculations match what's on there. And then it's going to give you a transaction ID number. Once you accept that or submit, it'll say either, let me go in here. It'll say agent details, and then you would just save your transaction. And that's when it would go to Lynn, and she will reference that and then be able to pay you. But until that's done, you will not get paid, even if everything is approved. Does that make sense? And I'll remind you, and a lot of times Lynn will remind you too that you have to submit those. Do I have time to do a couple of common mistakes? Especially on the new, I don't know why it's doing this, but on the new listing and buyer agency agreements, it's not populating from DocuSign, it's not populating their phone numbers. So at the very last page, this one is page 7, we need to have, in addition to the signature and date that they've signed, we'll need the seller's or buyer's phone number, email, and their current mailing address, not the one they're buying, but the one that they currently live in.
Carla, is the information updated in the contact information? And it's just not pulling over, or is it just where?
I don't think the current address is in DocuSign. I think it's just been the phone number.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I don't know why. That'll be a question for Jules and Leah, but
Okay.
so yeah, make sure everything else is complete out in here. So we definitely need, and this is one of the most common ones I have to reject is you need to get their phone number, their email, and their current mailing address. Okay, if it's as far as listing, even if it's the same address, please put it back there. Because that's what Sabra and Tasha reference when if they need to get a hold of the client for any reason. Okay. The other one, this is one, Tasha, that the authorizations for dual and designated agency. I
That's
know.
in conflict.
So the
Okay.
firm if they don't authorize the firm to act as the dual agent, then they shouldn't initial any of these boxes. Okay. But if they do act as a dual agent, if they authorize that, then they have to authorize one of the three, I mean. Okay. I know, Tasha, and you can verify with me, please. Sabra has said that if they act as dual agent, then they should not, or they should direct the firm to practice designated agent.
Designated or designated dual, either one, but designated.
Yes, yeah. So it would be the second one and then the last one that they would initial. Okay, so that's the best case scenario. I won't, if like this one, it looks like it's on the second line. I won't return that for that because that's the discussion you guys have with your clients, so. And make sure all the checks are in there. The one that's really important is the fuel tank. Okay, I'll definitely want you to fill that out because that's been a source of litigation a lot these days, apparently, per Sabra. Anything else? Do you guys have any other questions about any of the new forms? Just remember on the costs, the fee for service, now on the new form in stated 125, you're going to completely think this differently. The firm's fee is just the listing agent's fee. Okay, used to be the total. No, this is going to be just the listing agent. And then here is where I'm talking about. This one says the seller may offer 2.5%. The most common one to use is the firm is authorized. Okay, because the agent or the client is giving the firm authorization to pay the buyer's agency agreement. And then there should be a total cost of the firm here. Okay, so these two added up, she should have put 6% down here. Okay, does that make sense?
Sounds good.
As somebody asking a question.
Any questions, guys?
Nope. In the marketing part, the marketing date will either be the coming soon date if this is checked, or it will be the active date if this is not checked. Okay, the coming soon advertising. If that's checked and you don't have a date in here, I will return it. So if all of these are checked, I'm going to look for the active date in the coming soon advertising, and I'll look for the coming soon form to be signed. And that's the other thing that we need to discuss.
Oh, yeah.
About the coming soon and the firm exclusive form. But let me go, we'll get to that in just a second. Does anybody have any questions about this part? The marketing dates?
We got one question, Carla.
Okay.
Mary? The offer in command.
Yes.
Yeah, you can leave that blank. I think they call it a termination in some states or something, but you can leave that blank. All right, Carla, what else you
So-
got for us?
Just the coming soon and the no-show are coming soon, and the firm exclusive forms for MLS. These are important to do right as soon as you do the listing agreement. Get them signed along with the listing agreement. And then once they're signed, you need to send the listing agreement and that form to Tasha, okay, for her to sign. And that's so important because, and Tasha will tell you too, there have been so many that aren't signed. And so if there's an audit, I believe that we would get fined for not
Yeah.
having that in the MLS.
Yeah, and some, the think one of those. Being very diligent, in getting your signatures, being in compliance. We have stopped signing them if they are not in compliance.
Mhm.
That fine. Never not in compliance. Make sure you're getting those over, and we're happy to send them back if they're incorrect. Train you, educate you on how to complete them. So do that early on so that we can catch it before it gets past the deadline dates.
Yeah. Any questions on that? The one other thing, let me just put this out there on your MLS sheet. On your sheet, make sure when you're entering all your information, you go down to company remarks or company comments and let us know if the seller consents to dual or designated agency. Because if they don't, and if another agent from our office wants to show that, and it says here they do not consent, then I don't think that they can show it.
Everybody got that? Okay, so if you're advertising a listing and the seller says no to dual agent, designated agency, it wouldn't make sense for me to show it to my client, right? Because we're in the same office and that's dual agency.
Okay. I think I've covered it all.
Okay, sounds great. Any questions, guys? All right. Well, a couple of quick reminders. Make sure you set up your follow-ups communications. Who are you going to be communicating with? Most likely the lender from time to time. Is that going to be every 3 days, every 5 days? Are you scheduling the inspection for your buyer? Are you contacting the listing agent to make sure utilities are on for that inspection? Okay, what is your timeline to follow up with the closing attorney? Follow up with the listing agent, follow up with your client, the buyer or the seller. Okay, are they receiving documents that you've not seen? What's the status of their loan if you've not heard from the lender? What are they hearing that maybe you're not hearing? Okay, keep yourself in the middle of the transaction. That way you know what's going on. Carla already touched on your folders in Command, your consult folder, listing, under contract, and the same with the buyer. On your closing folder and prior to your closing folder, make sure you're communicating with your clients about wire fraud. Wire fraud is a real thing. We need to educate our buyers and sellers that they should not be wiring money until they speak to either the paralegal and you. Okay? Don't act on some random email or text that they get to send money. They need to speak with somebody, verify those account numbers before sending any money. Again, making sure your commission requests and commission information is submitted to the closing attorney, and all of that is accurate prior to getting to the closing table. Look for compliance messages from Carla so that you can clean up any forms or files that you need to have made corrections to, such as initials, date changes, a different form number, maybe you used the wrong form. We've got tips and advice from closing attorneys, lenders. When a buyer and seller agree to a concession in lieu of repairs, just indicate what the concession is. Don't need to indicate in lieu of repairs. From our instruction from the lenders is what that is. The right there, what those repairs are. If an underwriter sees this something and they concerned about it, okay, there's concessions being paid because of repairs, just indicate the change in the concession amount. Not necessary to add this in lieu of repairs. Addendums listed on page 14 should be submitted the lender with the contract, otherwise it might hold up the process. Additional provisions, item number 4, repairs listed could hold up the process until repairs are completed. Okay, not saying you shouldn't ask for repairs with your additional provisions document at the time you write the offer, just letting your buyer know it might take a little bit longer because the lender might require that those repairs be made prior to closing, right? Seller contributing to closing costs, verify with lender how much the seller is allowed to contribute at one just today. At the end of the transaction, buyer needed $4,500. Seller was willing to contribute, but the lender said, no, you can't contribute that much. The buyer's got to bring it. Okay, verify that information up so that you're not learning about it down the road. Appraisal, when to order the appraisal and who orders it. Educate your buyer. Who orders the appraisal? The lender. Who pays for it? The buyer. Find out from the lender what your diligence with the lender and talk about getting that appraisal ordered, especially if concerned about the value. Seller and buyer info sheets. Now anymore, most of those are going directly to the seller and the buyer. Make sure you're educating them on when to expect it, even ask the paralegal, although you're not going to complete it, if you can be copied on it. Okay, that lets you know when it was sent. Follow up with your buyer or seller to make sure they're completing it and sending it back. Okay. Contact information for the HOA, very important. Again, this could delay closing. A couple of our closing attorneys said they had to go and extend the closing for 11 days because they couldn't hear from the HOA. A lot of times the best person to contact that HOA is the seller. Okay, so if you're working with the seller and the attorney is saying that nobody from the HOA is responding, follow up with your seller and say, hey, contact the HOA at your complex because they're not returning phone calls. Carla touched on this when she was covering the forms in command that you might need to add that don't have a placeholder specifically, but an LLC document, a trust document, a power of attorney, any of those that you have, or any of those entities that you're working with, request a copy of those documents. Okay, we want to make sure we're working with individuals who are authorized to sign for that specific entity. Okay, again, common mistakes or omissions. Pay attention to those and make sure you're correcting them as quickly as possible and paying attention to Carla's instructions in her compliance emails. Any questions? Lots of information we covered today. Hopefully you took good notes, made a note of anything that didn't make sense, and please feel free to reach out if you need to go over anything again. Yes. I will check on that. They're kind of still in production. So we'll once they're finalized, we'll probably publish them right out here on the intranet, and we're happy to let you have them. Any questions? All right. Well, thank you guys. I hope that helped. Call me if I can be of help.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carla, for all of your help. I appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you. All right. Bye, everybody.